Welcome to the Motogp Xtra podcast.
So this week then, the MotoGP circus headed to Motegi for the 2024 Japanese Grand Prix. I'm Rhys, and joining me as always to discuss the events of the weekend is my co-host Dill. Now, Dill, of course, we're getting to that point of the season, the flyaway rounds. Motegi, always specifically to me, where in the past we've seen lots of championships get wrapped up here, like always seems to me like it's getting towards the end of the season. Are we now having that feeling that the season's starting to wind down, perhaps some championships getting decided and everyone's kind of a little bit further back, maybe switching their focus to next year?
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, obviously, we have one championship done, two left, one 78% done, so you can nearly say that we're really kind of waiting for one championship to be decided. But yeah, these flyaways, the start of flyaways still feel like there's a third of the season left, and then you get to Motegi, Sepang, you're like, yeah, Valencia is only around the corner, and then we'll see all the new bikes for 2025 and the new riders, new teams and all that, so it's getting exciting. But you can see, you like to see the Aprilia, obviously probably not a great track for them, but they look like they're focusing more on next year. Obviously pretty much every rider in their squad is leaving, so like they really have backed it off and they're trying to build for next year. So there is little signs throughout the classes that people are kind of winding down for 24 and starting their projects up early for 25.
Yeah, it does seem to be the general way everything's going in all the different categories. Obviously, a lot of riders still looking for seats and things like that, so people focusing more on race per race performances now, I think, than potentially championship positions, unless, of course, you're towards the sharp end, and then obviously you are still focusing on those championships you're fighting for, but anyone outside the top five really probably adjusting their focus now. But, of course, you did mention there that one championship is settled, so we may as well go straight into that with Moto3. David Alonso, we've been saying pretty much probably since Qatar, to be fair, that it was a matter of, when, not if, that he won this championship. I think I correctly predicted the round. I think I said that it would be Motegi, which is good. So I've got that one right. And also last week we did get it wrong how many points he needed. I think we were thinking that there was 5 races after Motegi, but there is actually only 4. So he only needed 100 points. He came in, 95, 96, something like that, point lead. So provided that he beat Holgado and didn't lose too many points to Ortola, and I think it was quite a lot of points to lose to Via, he was the champion. But it didn't matter because he went and smashed them, as he always does, winning yet again, now matching, not quite the record, but matching Mir, I think Marquez, and was it Fausto Gresini? They've also got 9 wins in the lower class, so some pretty prestigious names to be up there with. But David Alonso, is there anything else to say about the guy? I mean, he can win in every single way. He's shown, especially these last couple of rounds, that even if he looks like he's potentially struggling with maybe half the race to go or whatever, he can still come through, he can still fight, he can still force his rivals to make mistakes like he did today. And with all the pressure on his shoulders, well, I say all the pressure, I suppose he knows it was already wrapped up, so it was just a case of doing it whenever. But we have seen riders come into these scenarios where they're like, 40, 50 points in front and there's only a couple of rounds to go, and they can easily round it, like win the championship, and they bottle it and end up finishing 15th. But Alonso didn't strike it today, really intelligent ride. Is there anything else to say about him? We have just been gushing about him all year, pretty much.
Probably one of his best performances of the year, because I can't think of anything he did wrong today. From him sitting, he was P7 at the lowest from memory. I think Kelso passed at one point, and then he kind of got back to about 6th, and he was there for half race distance, 9 laps to go, and then lap after lap, one position. And by the time 4 laps to go, he's in the podium positions, and he even looks like he's not. It sounds it's stupid to say, but he looks like he's not trying. He like most riders are up out of the bubble really aggressively, and it looks like the bike's fishtailing their brakes. Whereas Alonso looks like for the last few laps before he kind of went for the lead, he was kind of just rolling in the braking zones a small bit, just kind of coasting a small bit, and he just seemed to have such an advantage. And when he got to the front, just there was no question really what he was going to do. It was no surprise. In fairness, Adrian Fernandez did probably better than most people expected to keep with him for that long. But unfortunately, when him and Arturo started battling, the gap to the championship leader went up, and that was pretty much the race done. Even though I don't think it would have made a difference, but it just compounded the fact that giving Alonso a bit of free track is not something you want to do. His championship celebrations were some of the best I've ever seen. The mini bike was absolutely brilliant, and the fact he crashes and the crash notification came up, hats off to him for that. It was a nice little bit of showmanship and kind of just a bit of something at the end of it. I really enjoyed just seeing the mini bike out and him floating around on that for a few. It would have been cool if you could have rode into Park Ferme, but it is in the rules that you have to ride your bike back even after the race. So unfortunately, we didn't get to see a mini bike in Park Ferme. But yeah, again, all year we've tried to kind of paint a picture of that there's a championship battle, but really we've kind of known that providing mechanicals or injury, really there was never going to be anyone good enough to take a championship off Alonso. We kind of, to be honest, we nearly knew last year how good he was. It was only a matter of fact that if he got a good start this year and I kind of gelled with the Pirellis, that he could kind of do something like this. Now, I don't think anyone expected him to match Marquez, Mir and Grassini. He probably will beat Rossi's record, but then again, a lot of people say the less races. But at the moment, I think he won 10 in 16 and Rossi won 11 in 16. So if he wins one next time out, it'll be pretty much the same. But so he's technically not beaten Rossi's record in as many races. So Valentino will hold on to the kind of, if you match it 1-for-1. But I'd say with the remaining four, he'll probably notch up a couple. I don't know what I'll see, because you can see sometimes from riders the championship is what keeps them kind of under load for the races, and then as soon as the pressure's off, they relax too much, and if they find it hard to kind of get up for the race on a Sunday. I don't feel Alonso will have that issue, but it will be interesting to see. Will we see a different type of Alonso? Will he maybe play with them a bit more? Will he just try and bolt and absolutely dominate, or will he just keep doing what he's doing and just want to get as many races up on the board as he can?
Yeah, we kind of saw that with Masia last year, didn't we, really? When he won at Qatar, he was like 14th in Valencia. He was like nowhere. Like, he completely took his eye off the ball, really. Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether he was just...
It's fair, Masia hasn't turned up on a motorbike since that Qatar race, to be really honest.
That's true. That is very, very true. He's not had a good season, bless him, in Moto 2. But yeah, like you said, the celebration is really cool. It was nice to see him riding that little mini bike. Like you say, it would have been really cool to see him ride it back to Parc Ferme, but of course not allowed. Well, the bike needs to make its way back, so I guess that's probably why. I mean, I suppose he could have rode it most of the way there and then got back on his bike, but yeah, I suppose you probably can't do the old Angel Nieto ride your bike back to the pits for you kind of thing, like they did, like Rossi did all those years ago, kind of thing. So yeah, you're probably not allowed that to do that these days. But yeah, even still, it was really good celebrations. They planned it. They'd obviously surprised him as well. I don't think he was expecting some of it, but yeah, he seemed to really enjoy himself, and it was good to see. It was a great ride as well, like you say. Obviously, once he got that little bit of a gap after Ortola fell off, that was pretty much it, and he was sorted. But I guess we'll have to see how he gets on in these last few races. I actually thought of something. They're never going to do this, but I thought I'd throw it to you anyway. It's like, would you now, if you were Aspar, put him in Moto 2 for the last couple of rounds, just to give him a couple extra races, just to get used to it, but learn the tracks on the Moto 2 bike, learn those Moto 2 Pirellis. Now, of course, he won't probably have the right build for it, because he won't have obviously worked out for it. He's been doing Moto 3 all year, but would that be, if you were in that position, would you do it? I mean, I imagine they're not going to, but,
I'd say no, for the sole reason that it's on paper, your idea is good, because you're thinking, right, more time he'll get the initial, but the jump from Moto 3 to Moto 2 is such a massive that he would actually probably be dangerously slow on Moto 2 bike for the remaining races. Everyone is so up to speed on them bikes and the Pirellis. He doesn't know the tyres as much as the Moto 3 to Moto 2 tyres are very different, regardless of them being the same manufacturer. It would just, I feel like he'd be, again, not to be disrespectful to them, but like you see most times in the Valencia test that they're 3, 4, 5 seconds off. By the end of the weekend, he'd probably be 1, 2, 3 seconds off. He'd be kind of comparable there, but I just think it'd be a bit too much for him to go into a race weekend jumping into a bike that he's never ridden. I think it would be just a step too far. I think the Valencia test and then the Jerez tests in February usually, and then he goes to Sepang, and probably a Qatar test as well thrown in. A lot of that, as well as he's going to be doing a lot of riding probably on an R6 or something to big himself up. And again, I think he's going to have a massive bulk over the winter. So I think, as much as I like the idea of throwing him in early and see what he can do, but I just think that the fact he's never been on the bike, new class to him completely. Moto 2 has historically been a massive difficult track class to jump into, so I just think it probably wouldn't be the best idea. But yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think it probably wouldn't be the best idea in the world. Probably sap his confidence a bit if he was right at the back as well.
That's what I thought too. Weekend,
yeah. But just a fun little idea, like, I could do that. I mean, to be fair, John McPhee stepped up once onto Moto 2 and was pretty competitive, so you can do it without having the whole preseason.
True, yeah, it is doable,
once.
but I just think after, would it be worth him going from dominating Moto 3 to being maybe humbled a small bit to the end of the season? He could go away then for the winter thinking, right, I'm not good enough for this, or he could be on his mind how much of a gap it is, or how he didn't enjoy the time at the end of the year. It would probably be better for him to have the 2-3 days in Sepang. They usually go to Jerez separately to GP for the Moto 2 and Moto 3. There's like 8-9 days of full riding on that bike before you have to turn a wheel competitively in practice, which I think would be much better, so that by the time he gets there, he's already fairly comfortable. He kind of knows a base setup, and he kind of knows the bike a bit more. And instead of him starting out in, we'll say, a Sepang race where extreme heat, crashes 3 times through the weekend and then is way off in the race, I think it would be much better to give him the actual pre-season time. And I think he could then go on to maybe have a really good rookie year, and then it just kind of, his star keeps growing and his confidence keeps growing, improves his ride, and just goes on further. I think that'd be the way, if I was around him or asked for anything like that. I think that's the direction I'd be looking to take him.
Yeah, I think that's a safe option, isn't it? Really, rather than I mean, it could turn out you could put him on it and really good straight away, but it's
exactly
likely that that's not going to be the case. It's going to need at least a few tests to get up to speed. So yeah, it'd been cool to see, but I think probably obviously not anything that's going to be happening or rumored to be happening. But it's one of those rare situations where you finished one class and you're actually staying with the same team. So I guess contractually it's probably possible, because they could probably run a third bike and just run one in Moto 3 or whatever. But yeah. Obviously, that was just a little idea I had. Thought I'd get your opinion on that one. But of course, with Alonso, not out the way necessarily, but sort of sorted with his championship. When we're talking about the championship now, I guess the focus is on second place, which is quite a contested little second place. We've got Ortola, we've got Via, we've got Holgado. All of those guys quite close. I imagine Ortola's done himself a bit of damage today by crashing. Holgado, did he finish third in the end, or was it? No, he wasn't third, because Adrian Fernandez on the podium again, wasn't he? So
fourth.
Yeah, fourth. And Colin Via ended up in second. So imagine those two are pretty close. Ortola's probably not done himself the best of good there. Obviously, we also had Angel Piqueras fall off. Not sure exactly where he was behind them, I believe, but I don't know how many points he was. But obviously, again, will have done himself some damage. But obviously, still 4 rounds to go, so still plenty to play for. I know the idea of finishing second in the championship is probably not the most interesting, but that's where the attention shifts to now. Have you got any idea of maybe who the favourite for that one is potentially going to be? Again, just to put you on the spot.
For second in championship, we go Vire. 3 points in at the moment, 212 to 209. Ortola is 191, so unless the two of them have a terrible run in, I don't think it'll be Ortola. I think Ortola would do well even to finish third at this point. They're so close, but I'd put my money on Colin Vire. I think when I'm moving up, he'll really want to put the pressure on. I think he's more consistent than Holgado. I think, to be honest, Holgado's outright one-off pace is probably better. But over a race weekend, I think Colin Vire is just a smarter and more complete rider and kind of gets more out of the package. And that's also with him being kind of hamstrung as well, a small bit by his weight and size in that class. So he'll be someone I'll be really looking forward to see next year. But I think for the end of this year, I'd be leaning towards the Dutchman, really. I think he will probably do better in the last few flyaways and then go into Valencia. I think his actual size generates a bit more heat. I know Holgado isn't a small Spanish rider like we've seen, but I think just the Colin Vire kind of aspect of generating temperature in a cold Valencia will even stand to him back in the last race this season.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't want to be one of those podcasts where we just agree on everything, but I would probably say the same there with Vire Pro being my favourite for him. Actually,
Holgado just seems to kind of just misfire every couple of rounds and finish the 7th, whereas bar the crash for Vire, I think he's nearly always nearly on a podium or 4th. He's there, whereas I think Holgado somehow finishes behind Yamanaka some races where you're thinking like you shouldn't be battling against him, and like you should be like, it's the reason why we've this point of the season he's already 107 points behind him in the championship. It's because he has these races where 8 is his limit, and you're thinking that's not championship level enough, unfortunately, week in, week out for him.
Yeah, I was actually about to say, I'm surprised that he actually is second in the championship, because he's had some of these rounds where he's been missing, whereas Vire, we seem to talk about him every week saying he's there or thereabouts. I don't know if the two Mazzanos are a bit rough for him, from what I remember.
He's probably actually crashed out of a good few positions, if you remember.
Yeah, that's true. He crashed out.
He's nearly always been there, probably crashes a bit more than Holgado.
Yeah.
And again, if we look at Ortola, we've already mentioned that Ortola is 9 out of 10 once out of 7 races, and then the other ones he's kind of a top 10 finisher. So Artola's very, very hot and cold. Fires are very hot. Crashes, Holgado is kind of a mix of all of them put together, and that's kind of why they're so close in the championship.
Yeah, it's rare that you see it so close, actually, especially when someone's dominated so much, but it's good to see. It's a shame, really, that it's not the battle for the championship in a way, because it would be a really good, just last few rounds to watch.
A 3 or 4 rider running would be really good, I agree.
Yeah, but it would be definitely one of the seasons that you look back on saying that not that the field was weak, but that nobody really was that commanding over the season.
Yeah,
just because Alonso was just so far ahead of me. Maybe if Alonso wasn't there, things would be different, but of course that absolutely isn't the case. But those are the top riders in the championship. But somebody else that's almost shown himself and potentially one of those top riders in the championship for next year, Adrian Fernandez. I mean, not someone that I expected to be saying that about at the start of the season, I'm not going to lie, but his last few races, 2 podiums in a row. It's his first podium coming in last week in Mandalika, another podium here at Motegi. But even before that, he's kind of been a bit more there or thereabouts. Seems like the Leopard guys as a whole have made a step. The other Hondas, not so much. They were a bit better at the last couple of rounds, but that was more because the Honda was working better. But a circuit here, which ironically owned by Honda, where the Hondas were struggling and not quite on the pace. The Leopards again seem to be towards the front. And obviously Picaras crashing, Adrian Fernandez was flying the flag, and another podium for him, looking a bit more consistent, looking still quite aggressive in the races, but not maybe as sillily aggressive as we've seen him in the past. Obviously last year he came in towards the end of the season, that Leopard team obviously caused some controversy in Qatar. I know you weren't exactly pleased, well I don't think any of us were pleased with his riding in that round, but I suppose that was the instructions given to him to an extent. Obviously was to try and help his teammate. He perhaps took it a bit further than people would agree is fair. But even still, he kind of brushed that aside. His season this year's kind of been a bit mixed, but last few rounds really started to build. Maybe we could see him. No, I'm not going to say he's a championship contender for next year or anything, but maybe a race win or 2 potentially next season for Adrian Fernandez.
If you kind of cast your mind back to the end of last year, he could have won in the wet in Phillip Island. Obviously,
That's
he was
true,
fast
actually.
in the Qatars towards the end of the year. So I think this kind of part of the championship actually just suits him, to be brutally honest. For a bit of his Moto3 career, it's kind of been felt that he's there because what his brother's done, and he's kind of been able to keep himself around. But I think he is producing into a decent top tier level, kind of getting towards a front runner in the Moto3 class. To the stuff at last year, I feel like I suppose was that ride was dangling before him, and he was kind of given an ultimatum of like, you need to do what we need you to do, and this is your job. And maybe he went a bit too far with it, but like if you tell a youngster that his ride depends on his performance in aiding his teammate, his hands are kind of tied in that situation. Like, so again, we all talked kind of negatively last year about how it ended and it was terrible and nobody wanted to see that, but he's this year been better. Again, you look at him and go, how good is that Honda? Would he have been, we'll say, similar to Holgado if he's on Holgado's bike this year? Is that the sort of level we're looking at if he's just on a better equipment? But definitely has been more impressive this year. He is turning into a much better rider than I expected. To be honest, after his first few seasons in the class, I thought we'll probably see this guy fall to the wayside. I didn't think he'd make it, but he has turned around and he's maturing bit by bit. So we might see I don't know if he has the potential to be champion, but I also didn't see him turning into what he is now. So there's no reason why he can't go on another step and potentially become a contender in that class. So we'll see how it goes in the next season or so for him and see if he can produce himself into something similar to his brother. I don't know if the ceiling is there, but look at Mark and Alex really. Mark is convinced Alex has always been the faster one, and Alex has always been a bit of a slow burner, but there's no question that when Alex eventually gets it right, he is very fast. So maybe same as said for Adrian Fernandez, that he just needs maybe a bit more time. Again, you just always post a bit of a question when it comes to the Honda riders, how good that bike is.
Well, that's a good way to end Moto3 with you comparing Ralph Fernandez to Marc Marquez. That's
Yeah, exactly.
To be fair, similar
I'll come back
2
to that.
seasons, I guess, to be fair. So on to Moto2 then, and to be honest, probably the most interesting race of the weekend, and obviously for the actual riders themselves, maybe not for the right reasons. Tricky conditions. We had kind of weird weather all weekend, kind of raining on and off over all 3 days, kind of ruined the running, especially for Moto 3, but for Moto 2 as well. But obviously, we started the race, it was dry, maybe 4 corners into the first lap, starts raining. By the time they get to Sector 3, rain is absolutely pouring down, people's feet are sort of going down the ground, riders started raising their hands, you can visibly see it on the camera, red flag comes out, and then obviously that is reset time, and time for some gambles, but very tricky conditions there at the start of the Moto2 race. Do you envy the riders having to try and make that decision with the slick versus the wet? Obviously, most went for the wet, so that turned out to be the wrong decision, but it's always pretty tricky on the grid to pick, especially when you don't know whether it's going to rain again, which I guess is what those guys were kind of hoping for.
It's one of those ones that there's always winners and there's always losers. They never all get it right. There's always, because there's nearly, like, no matter what the weather is, there's always a kind of rough feeling that this is a safe option, this is the risky one. And the guys who are nowhere in the championship, maybe a home race, maybe their contract is up, maybe they need a performance. If it was the risky decision, they'll take it 10 times out of 10, whereas your championship leaders usually go, right, I'll play it safe. If I get a 7th place today and I score 8 points, 5 points, 6 points, whatever it may be from my kind of top 10 finish, I'll take it. I'm not going to end in the gravel. I'm not going to do a collarbone on a wet patch. So it's usually the championship riders that play it a bit more cautious in these situations. But it's just one of those ones. I actually enjoy these races because I love the strategy of it, and people have to make this. And I like leave it in the riders' hands. I don't like that the team are constantly, this is what we should do, this is what we should do. I think they should voice their opinion and give, like, I'm fairly sure for example, now KTM, obviously not in Moto 2, but for the GB class, they have a very, very high-tech weather system, so they can pretty much call it. If we go back to the first Mazzano, Augusto Fernandez said that their kind of supercomputer, will say, absolutely called the weather to a T. So there's in this paddock we can have very accurate weather recordings, but again, all weekend it did seem that Sunday at this time would be dry, so it was pretty interesting to see 5-6 corners into the race and there was a lot of rain, and then we did get to kind of the V corner and it was red flagged, and it did look like it was kind of treacherous conditions. So I was glad it was red flagged, and I was at that point actually it was red flagged. I got a little bit nervous that maybe my poor skybox didn't record, because I've had issues before when races get red flagged that the recordings go missing. So the fact that the Moto 2 race was kind of around 4:30 a.m. my time, I obviously wasn't up, so my immediate fear was that, oh no, I mightn't see this Moto 2 race. But in the end, thankfully, because recording nearly all the races, you end up getting pretty much all the footage one way or another. So yeah, but yeah, I really feel as a championship rider, you are really on edge in them conditions, but you kind of have to play it safe, bar one rider, of course.
Yeah, you got to make reference there. One rider. Let's move on to a master gamble I've got here from Iagora. Now, what a risk it was. Now, obviously, we spoke about it a little bit in Mazzano. The local lads had the advantage, sort of knew that, when it's like this, when it smells like this, it was even brought up, so maybe it's a similar thing here. They know how much it's going to rain. And here, the local lad, Iagora, well, I say local, he's Japanese. I don't actually know whereabouts in Japan he's from. If it's
North
actually
Tokyo.
Okay, there you go. So
two and a half
couple of
hours
away, so not too far away. So it will be probably similar conditions to what he's used to then. And he went for the gamble. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I saw it, because I was the same watching it recorded. So as soon as the red flag basically came out, fast forward to the back on the grid again. And then I see him pulling up with a slick on, and I'm like, well, I've just seen a load of other people pull up with a wet tyre on. I was like, this could be interesting. We also saw Zonta on the front row as well with a slick. There was some other riders on slicks as well, but you didn't see them because they're a bit further behind. But it's kind of like, this is an interesting gamble there. They get off the line, they go to turn 1. I immediately spotted sort of Zonta sort of gets swamped by the wet runners, and you're thinking, oh, Agora's going to go backwards as well. And you see coming out the first corner, Agora's getting like sideways, going with them, and right from that sort of opening lap, as you went further around the track, I don't know about you, but as I was thinking, as they were going further around that lap 1, I was thinking, he's made the right call 100%, because they're going around every corner, it's like, you can see it's dry there, you can see it's dry there, and it almost looked like once they'd finished the opening lap, they'd be foolish to pick wet tyres, I thought, because the track looked completely dry everywhere. It must have just been that they thought it was going to rain more, surely, because the track didn't look wet anywhere, really. Maybe on the curbs and stuff, but then you just stay off the curbs. You don't go on wets. I mean, even on wets, you crash if you go on the curbs when they're wet. So, yeah, it seemed like one hell of a gamble when he first pulled up, but as it turned out in those first couple of laps, he just managed to stick in there for lap 1, lap 2, and then at that point, tyres up to temperature, the other guy's tyres were overheating, he just went forward, passed people like they were standing still, and Iagora, I mean, what a risk. Now, we said we didn't think he'd take any more risks this season, but he certainly seems to have done it. Maybe the local knowledge playing into him, but what were your thoughts when you first saw him pulling up on the grid with those slicks on?
I was a bit concerned because he was obviously being the championship leader. The camera really was focusing on him, and he was kind of like twisting his head, looking up at the sky, thinking. He even said afterwards he wasn't sure if it was the right decision. And then, like while the back of the grid were kind of forming up, he was down looking up through his bubble to see if it was covered in rain, and he was wiping his kind of visor and then putting his hand out to see if the rain was falling. So you could see even as the point at the end of the warm-up lap when we were about to go racing, he was still kind of maybe questioning his own decision to go. But I unfortunately wasn't as sharp as you. On the opening lap I was eating tea and toast, so I was a bit distracted and I didn't notice that half the track looked dry. After a lap or so, I started to notice that he hadn't. So obviously Zonta and him were the kind of the main two that we knew of on the dry tyres. They're the only ones that kind of qualified decently well and that the coverage could have picked up. Xavi Arctic Gas was another one. There was Jeremy Alcoba and Philip Salich. Joe Roberts, with about 6 laps ago, ends up hitting for a set of soft dry tyres, but it was
Gonzalez
kind of too late
too,
at that point.
our race winner, was on slicks.
Gonzalez, of course, yes, exactly. That would have been some race win if he managed to do that on the
50
the,
seconds
wets,
ahead of the guys on the on the wets as well.
Yeah, but I just felt then it just started to look. I was kind of like, Igor dropped to 16th at his lowest position. I was thinking, right, he's like 3 positions behind Garcia. I was like, this isn't really like it isn't a terrible decision still. And then all of a sudden he's 14th. I'm like, and at that point I think Garcia got up to about 11th. I'm thinking, right, maybe he's just after getting enough temperature he can almost match them in the dry parts and kind of take it casually in the wetter part of the track. And then all of a sudden he's after jumping 3 people into one corner and he's on the back wheel of his teammate. And I'm thinking, oh no, he's the one made the right decision. The whole field is wrong here, because at that point in the race, my knowledge was only 2 people, Zonta van der Herberg and Iagor were the only 2 people I believe that were on the dry tyres. So yeah, he made light work of cutting through the field. And it was a serious decision. Again, there must be some local knowledge. Again, you look at these Japanese, Asian, these Asian riders that have obviously raced here year on year in Asian Talent Cups and all these other local championships that we probably wouldn't know much about, but they've definitely had this exact sort of kind of scenario before and have some sort of, again, local-ish knowledge to the area when it comes into the weather. And he made a perfect decision. Very risky, I must say. At the same time, he has a bit of a championship lead, so even if worst case scenario he throws away 10 points today, doesn't score points, and Garcia is, we'll say, 10th or 9th, it's still not terrible, really. But it was still a big risk to take that much of a gamble on a track that was not that wet, but definitely wasn't a full dry track.
Yeah, it was one hell of a gamble to take. Obviously, for probably once ever, it's kind of panned out by going on the other option, because like you said, there was only 6 riders out of the whole grid that went on the slicks. Like you said, obviously Joe Roberts had pit at the end, but I don't really know why he did that, to be honest. It seemed a bit weird, because surely if you come in the pits, because I guess the only reason to come in surely would be if your tyre was completely chewed, but then surely you'd just retire rather than put on dries, because you'd end up a lap down. It's not like 20 people are going to crash in front of you and you get points, so yeah, it seemed a little bit strange, because you're not going to make that back up in like 5 laps either, so yeah, it seemed like a weird decision. But yeah, Iagora obviously worked out for him, not quite as well as it did for Manuel Gonzalez, though. He was coming through the pack at the similar kind of time. You saw as Agora was making his way through the pack, you'd see a fastest lap for someone a bit further down, like Gonzalez, or you saw Alcoba was one of them. Like, you could tell some of the people were on the dry tyres as well. And Gonzalez, the way he cut through the pack was ridiculous. He was going around the outside of everybody. I mean, into, was it the hairpin curve, he went round the outside of 2 riders. So it was Vietti, one of them. I can't remember who the other one was, but it was ridiculous. And then he went round the outside of somebody at the 90 degrees. Well, actually, it might have been Vietti at the 90 degree and 2 others before. I can't remember exactly which riders it were now, but it was just, it's crazy. It was insane amount of risk to take. I mean, it made sense because Obviously, he just had so much more grip, so he could do it, but it just seems like really treacherous to put yourself there. And then when he finally got his way through to second place, he had... It was a decent gap to Agora, was it? Probably about 3 seconds, something like that, potentially?
4.5 seconds.
4.5 seconds, so...
It was about 1.8 after he took like 3 or 2.4 out of him in one lap, so... Yeah, it looked like at that point when he got to second that there was no way he'd catch him. But like, I think Agora realised he had kind of 4.5 seconds back to, would have been Dixon, I suppose, at the time. And he was pretty much kind of thinking, right, I can literally just go around at 85% here and bring this home. And I think it just gave Gonzalo a lap that I think he maybe could have won it if he hadn't given him the 2 seconds that lap. I think he would have had to maybe work a bit harder. I know Gonzalo's beats him pretty comfortably in, but I think if he's a bit more up to speed on that lap that he gives away the 2.3 seconds, that's such a margin to make back up a track like Motegi, that if we'd say Igor was closer to his dry limit, it would be much closer in terms of the race. But it's easy to say that. And again, took a big risk going on the dries. I don't think he needed to take every risk today.
No, he didn't want to take the risk. Like, he obviously took the risk on the tyre decision, but also at the same time, it's a risk. But then if he thought that was the right move, he would have felt silly if he'd gone on the wets. Okay, yes, he matched everybody else, but then he'd been like, well, it was clearly the wrong choice, and obviously you don't want to be riding around on those. So, yeah, I knew not to take too much risk. Obviously, Gonzalez, like you said, sort of caught him up like quite a lot at first. I mean, he was still taking chunks out of him. It was over like half a second pretty much every lap, wasn't it? Even when Agora responded a little bit. And he caught him. To be fair to Gonzalez, he was very, very good with the way he overtook I as well. He clearly was taking a bit of care to overtake him in a clean way. I think he could have probably just blocked past him straight away, perhaps pushed him a bit wide, but he doesn't want to do that to the championship leader, doesn't want to interfere with the championship. So also, like he jokingly alluded to in the Part Fermi interview, like, sorry for taking the win off the local guy to all the fans. So also, you don't want to knock the local guy off at home out of the win. It's going to be pretty difficult to get out the circuit if you do that. Well, maybe Japan's not too bad. They'll probably forgive you. But yeah, it's obviously he wanted to make sure it was a clean move. He did it. Really nice move into the V corner, I think, wasn't it, at the end? Or yeah, that's where he set it up on the exit of like the chicane. Took the lead. Didn't look back, to be fair, at all. That was it. Agora did try and come back at him a little bit at the end. He gained a couple tenths back, but I think, again, just thought better of it. Thought it was better to take the 20 points, and Manuel Gonzalez finally breaks that win duck. It's been a long time coming for him. We thought he was going to do it this season, obviously after the back of the performance we saw in the VR46 team last year, well, the Master Camp team, probably should I say. VR46 team obviously was the other. No, it's the VR46 Master Camp, but of course that kind of sounds more like the other team. But even still, we all had question marks on that team. We thought going into Grassini would probably be a championship contender. I think it's fair to say he's perhaps under-delivered or perhaps not met the expectations we expected of him, but finally on the top step of the podium, I think he's going to be over the moon with that one, and it's a good way to move forward into his new team for next year, which is the Intact GP, another team that we know is quite a decent team, so we'll have to see if he can follow this up with some more next season, and obviously in the rounds we've got left.
Yeah, for me, I look at the Moto2 Grassini, I don't think, like, we've seen Grassini this year in GP, it's probably not the greatest team to be in. We've seen a lot of failures, a lot of mechanicals, a lot of just mistakes. They let Mark Marquez go without knee sliders at Assen. Like, that's not what I call championship winning teams, and I know now they're not the exact same team, they have different teams, just same sponsor, right? But for the Moto2 team, I feel
it's the same, though, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah, the top ones are the same, and I feel like there's so little lack of sponsorship. I wonder, is that kind of a... Like, I feel like the Grassini team is run on a shoestring, and maybe that Moto2 team is probably a budget team in a sense. But I just feel like it was probably the right step to go to Grassini for this year, but I don't think really... When's the last time Grassini won in Moto2 in a championship kind of hunt or anything? I can't think of anything. And he's been well clear of his team at all year, so... as much as it's probably not been the jump forward that we probably would have hoped from him this year, I still think that he's been better. He's got the win. He's been there some points, and he's been very fast in points. But again, I just think maybe, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think next year with a better team, the Intact team seems to be just a bit more of a, I suppose, a better performing team is probably the only way to say it. They seem closer to the front. I'd imagine they should get the better of him. Whether he'll be a championship rival kind of in the hunt, I don't know, to be honest. Moto2 is such a difficult one. It's quite hard to see without the form book of that season, you need to kind of get in and get a couple of races in. Like, nobody, we would have not have said at the end of last year that Joe Roberts would have had a good tilt at the championship, and that's what happened. We wouldn't have said Sergio Garcia would have been favoured most of the year until started to go a little off the beaten path for him. So Moto 2 is very much start season well, build form, and you can go on and win a title like that. So maybe it might come back to bite him, jumping 3 teams in 3 years. That might affect him, but again, same bike, same tyres, so it'll be should be a good year from the next year. And he was brilliant today. I'm a big fan of Manu. I've kind of said it over the last kind of year and a half when on the podcast. Very, very tidy rider. Again, used his head, could have easily lunged on a very kind of greasy track today at Iagora and tried to make the move early, kind of set a precedent of what his race pace was. Took his time, made a very clean pass, and just put about a second and a half, 1.78 into him, and kind of maintained that gap for the majority of the race then. And it was enough to get his win, and he was again very respectful in Park Farm to the Japanese fans, and again dedicating his win to Salvadori. So it was just overall a very good day for the first time winner in Moto 2.
Yeah, it was nice to see. It was a nice little tribute as well, and like I say, we are fans of Gonzalez on this podcast. I think it's one of those things where you can see the talent that he's got, and you just want to see it shown in a really, really good team. But of course, then the World Championship, is it effectively over now at this point? Obviously, Igora gaining pretty much the full 20 points on all his rivals. Roberts didn't score, Canet didn't score, Garcia scored like 2 points. Obviously, I don't think anybody else is really in it. Lopez didn't do too bad, to be fair. Lopez was about 6th or something like that. Or no, it couldn't have been 6th because 6 people on dries. Was he about 8th?
7 or 8.
Yeah, 8th, something like that. So he scored a few points, but nothing amazing. I think anybody else would be too far down to count, really. But again, like Dixon and Vietti were around same position, really, as Alonso Lopez, if you want to include those two as well. So, yeah, Aldeguer was, I think, out the points, or was really far down the points as well. So, yeah, pretty much he was the only guy in the top positions that scored a healthy amount of points, aside from maybe Lopez. So, it's looking like it's pretty much done now. He has a chance to mathematically win it at the next round, which I cannot believe that he'd be able to win it with 3 rounds to go, considering where we were at, like, 3 rounds previous to this. He wasn't even leading the championship, was he? So, he would have literally only just be about taking the lead, and all of a sudden, now this championship that's kind of been close and looked like Garcia's for a lot of it, looks like Agora is going to win it with 3 rounds to go, which is absolutely crazy, especially considering like how his championship tilt went last time. It kind of looked like it's perhaps going to go down to the wire, but this second half of the season, Agora has just been really, really solid. Really, ever since he broke his hand, and even before that, he looked so good. And imagine how far he'd be in front if he hadn't done that, because he'd have had a better race. Austria probably would have won that. He probably would have been more competitive. Aragon, he could already be the world champion if he hadn't done that.
Mainly from Le Mans on, when they got the 1-2, he's been best rider in the class. We've seen standout riders like Dixon in Britain. We saw Vietti showed up a few times. We've seen Arbolino, real good performances, but the man that's been the most consistent and best performer, again, it was such a shame that one mistake all year he's made in Austria, and it was an injury, and it kind of just put him out of being that 100% bulletproof kind of form that he was in for a couple of rounds. But yeah, really, it's kind of the thing. It's not as maybe of a walkover, we could say, as Moto 3, but it's still kind of going the same way. It's just a matter of time when Igor wraps it up. We could have been celebrating 2 championships here if it wasn't for that crash in Austria. He looked untouchable that weekend. A heavy braking circle like that, you would have put him probably as favourite up to Vietti in Austria. So I think he's probably down 25 points there. That puts him probably in the 80 points ahead. And then you could probably maybe make the argument that he could probably have picked up 20-25 points that he would have dropped in the rounds where he was injured. So it was a real good performance from him today. And again, it's the same situation as Moto 3, just been no one consistent enough to really put him under pressure. Even the fact he was out injured, even like he's had maybe a slower start to the season. It was first couple of rounds, he by far wasn't the quickest, or didn't look like the champ to rival. He looked like he great late race pace, but that's just kind of his mantra, really. Is just he comes late in the race, a bit like Passionini, but he seemingly found out how to qualify in these rallies, and since then he hasn't looked back, and he's he's going to finally, after his third attempt at the championship, going to get one. He should be, in my eyes, already have 2 championships. I was unfortunate in Moto 3 against Arenas. Obviously threw away the Moto 2 title a couple of years back, and then injured himself before last year. So you could even have, like, he's been fast and strong every year. So the fact he's only now getting his first championship is almost a bit bizarre, because how it feels like for a good few years now we've been talking about how fast and strong and consistent he's been. But it's pretty much done now. I can't see any way, barring injury mechanical, the same as I said with Alonso, where I didn't see for most of the year anyone would be able to beat him, and I don't see him going out to Thailand and being 11th and really struggling, kind of similar to what Garcia has been for the last, I suppose, 3 months at this point. Really, is it's been that long since Garcia has really been, he's gone missing for pretty much half race or half season distance. Garcia is seemingly lost form. It's so strange. We've seen like a carbon copy to what happened with Vietti and a kind of Arbolino, where they just lose that 1% and they go from championship runners, podiums every week, to being like barely scoring points. It's amazing how competitive and how tight and how difficult it is to ride Moto 2 bike at the top level in this championship. It's great to see. And then when someone can do it so consistently as Igor, it just kind of puts extra kind of praise onto the fact many riders over the last couple of years haven't been able to do it. Even Augusto Fernandez year, when he won it, most of the first part of the season he was kind of anonymous. He was picking up top fives and getting good results, but no way did he look like he was going to win a championship. So again, for most people, you win a championship kind of getting consistent results over the year. Was Igor this year has been by far the standout rider for the majority of the season.
So on to the Premier class now then, MotoGP. And the first thing to talk about really is the qualifying session, actually, which is not something we typically talk about. Usually we'll talk about it when all these people dawdling and waiting for toes or whatever, but just the actual circumstances of the qualifying this weekend were pretty strange. Obviously, again, like we said, weather pretty intermittent all weekend, so it started to rain a little bit and everyone's trying to rush out the pits straight away in MotoGP to try and get their laps in, because they thought it was just going to keep getting worse and worse. As it turned out, that actually wasn't the case. The track actually got better and better, and we saw some all-time lap records. But obviously we had Martin making a mistake and crashing, Marc Marquez setting an all-time lap record, getting it taken away by Gunn on the green, but that was not communicated till the end of the session, which obviously then affected him and meant he couldn't do another lap because, well, when you've set an all-time lap record and you're not going to push any more, I suppose, once you're that far in front of everybody else as well. So that obviously caused some weird scenarios, and it ended up with Pedro Acosta on pole position. So what did you make to that qualifying session? Probably one of the most interesting ones we've had for a good while.
It was the most interesting part of the weekend for the Premier class, which is pretty sad for me. Starting off, Pecco, another dud tire, because he said himself, like, he was 4.6 seconds.
Surely, can it?
It can't
this is like
be,
the fifth,
surely.
sixth time now. It must be like something to do with the way they prepare the tire, maybe.
There must be something they're doing to affect tires. But surely we haven't seen Bastianini have an issue with a tire. He seems to be like the tire whisperer. I can't be thinking that it's a tire each weekend, but again, it looks like it, because it's the same situation where he said that the rear of the bike wasn't working. He came in, put a new tire in, and, well, front row. So it's worrying, because the championship could be decided on something so simple as a tire at this point, because it's just been every weekend there's been something where it's either Jorge Martin, where it's been Pecco, it's even other riders we're saying who've probably had good pace and then they get a bad tire or something goes wrong. But it's just one of those things where every weekend we're seeing it and we just don't know really what the outcome of this is going to be, because we obviously know next year we're going to be on the same tires. So yeah, it's just a weird one. But again, straight away he came in, new tire, went back out, and instantly was like seconds faster. And Pecco, I know he makes mistakes and he does sometimes. I wouldn't say he lacks confidence. He just sometimes there's just a fault in him, and that's just the way he is. I don't think he is the sort of rider that would get like multiple world champion kind of in his prime in terms of ability and performance. I don't think he'll get tight because there's a few drops of rain. Happened in the sprint, happened in the main race, it didn't affect him. So I don't think it's Pecco. Whether it's a Ducati bike issue, it's strange that Pecco keeps getting this issue. Whether it's a tyre thing, again, strange that Pecco keeps getting them. But it's just strange that something got on. But that was the first kind of story we had that Pecco had some sort of issue. We'll put it down to, because again, I don't want to keep throwing Michelin under the bus every week on the podcast. But came back in, he was much quicker. Everything looked okay. We still had a questionable track condition. And then, in fact, Marquez sent these amazing lap times. Pedro was very close to beating him, but just didn't have that last few tenths to catch him. And I think Marquez could have done another 2 flying laps in the time between him setting a new all-time lap record and the lap being basically taken away at the end of the session. Of course, I saw on Twitter Frankie Carcetti, Mark's crew chief, very unhappy that it took them so long. It came down to a software glitch. Every track limits gets put through a software on Dorna's computer, and it comes back with a result, whether it's been a track limits or not. For some reason there was a glitch in that one, so they had to manually do it, which cost them the time, and that was the reason why Mark's time was taken away after the session. It's unfortunate. He still went off and touched the green, so his lap should have went away, but I do agree it was unfortunate that pole position was taken away from him and he ended up starting 9th. But Jorge Martin making another mistake, a bit needless, to be brutally honest. Again, you just, on the GP24, you need to be just on the front 2 rows. We've seen what he done in Misano. He kept leading into turn 1 from 4th. So it was a bit silly of him. He kind of got away with it in the end, really, by having good opening laps and being able to kind of maybe bully his way through. But like, we could be sitting here and talking about a completely different scenario if that crash came back to bite him. Like we say, look at Pecco's crash in Le Mans in qualifying, cost him in the sprint because he rammed the other bike, then had an issue with that bike, and in the main race looked like he just didn't have it all there, end up finishing behind the other 2. So we could have been having a much different discussion about Jorge Martin's weekend. He's recovered it very well from his qualifying crash, but again, you're playing with fire each weekend that you have a crash, and I know Marquez did it for so long, but I think Martin needs to be very careful because he is crashing quite a bit. He crashed to Misano, crashed twice in Mandalika, he's crashed again here. Like, if he crashes in Phillip Island, there's no really slow corners you can crash there. There's a handful, but most crashes in Phillip Island are weekend enders for the most part. So let's hope he can be not more careful, because that's not the right way, but he can be just a bit more precise the rest of the year. I don't think Martin was having a great weekend. I think he was trying to put in maybe a better lap than he was potentially able to. I think that's what caused the crash. But it was a very interesting qualifying session, but it's just a bit sad that was like my highlight of the weekend, was watching qualifying.
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes, the fact that we're spending time talking about it, because usually we just completely skip over it. But yeah, I thought I'd make mention of it because it was probably, like you said, the most interesting part of the weekend, and lots of different stuff, and obviously there was the software issue and stuff, so it's obviously worth bringing that up just to say, look, it actually really wasn't their fault for once. It wasn't the steward's fault, because from what I understand, the sensor was triggered. It's supposed to then just send a notification to the rider and team and then remove the time from the timing screen. It just didn't do any of that. So yeah, race direction were aware the lap should have been taken away, but they weren't, like nobody else was. Obviously it took so long to do that, didn't give them the chance to do another lap. But of course, pole position man, Pedro Acosta. Did we think when he was on pole position that he'd end up with 0 points from the weekend? I certainly didn't think so. Obviously that sprint race immediately was really, really competitive. Obviously he lost the position to Bagnaia off the start, so he lost the lead. So he was sat there in second place. A couple of laps in, sort of closing right to the back of him through like turn 4. You're like, wow, he's really right on the back of him. He makes a move down into turn 5, I guess it would be. I assume those are the actual corners. You know, when you try and add them up and you lose count, because I'm pretty sure the long first corner is like 2 corners. So yeah, it's one of those ones. I'm pretty sure it's 4 down to 5, but you know what I mean. The corner before the bridge, where he actually he made the pass up the inside, and he took the lead, and he looked pretty comfortable out front of the lead. Was not pulling away initially, was just keeping in front. But then as the race went on, there was only 3 laps to go, something like that. Wasn't many laps to go. Obviously, I know it was only a sprint, but he'd done most of the hard work, and he'd started to stretch away a little bit now. It was probably 0.5, 0.7, something like that, maybe somewhere in that range. Over half a second in front. It's a bit of a comfortable lead, not super comfortable, but it was getting towards probably the better part of a second. And to me, at least, very unexpectedly, just washes the front out into the chicane, sliding into the gravel. That's him out of the race. And then, unfortunately, in the main race, he did a similar thing. Obviously, he wasn't leading on that occasion. Probably was riled up by the fact that he was obviously winning and crashed out of the lead yesterday. I think the pace of the Ducatis was better compared to the KTMs in the main race and the sprint. I think the KTMs looked really good in the sprint. Obviously, it was unfortunate for Brad to have the incident, but in the sprint, they looked like they could take it to the Ducatis potentially. Maybe not quite having that pace in the main race. Pedro, again, pushing a bit too hard, clips a curb at the final chicane. Down he goes, and what looked like potentially, I genuinely thought it was going to be his first win there in that sprint race, but unfortunately not. And unfortunately, 0 points for Pedro. Another good weekend, though, off the back of Mandalika, which was a fantastic second position. So it does seem like he's finally back on track, a bit where he was earlier on this season. But just a shame for him that maybe doesn't quite have the equipment to take it to the Ducatis, but is so desperate to get a win because the championship doesn't matter to him that maybe he's just pushing over the limit a bit too much trying to get there.
Yeah, it's not a massive surprise in one sense that he finished the weekend with 0 points after being so quick, because he's kind of at the point now where he could finish pretty much fifth every week behind Marquez, probably without breaking much of a sweat. It's beating the two factories and Jorge Martin, Factory Ducatis and Martin, as well as Marquez on the GP23. I think pretty much week in, week out he could finish fifth, and probably it'd be nearly like 2013 where Rossi just couldn't beat his teammate in the two Repsols, and each week he would it was in no man's land. Most week he'd have Alvaro covered in Cal and whatever, he'd end up finishing fourth most weeks. I think Pedro could probably, at this most point now, finish his most race weeks ends in P5, and then the odd one probably sneak a podium when there's issues for riders in front. But I think already he knows that's not good enough for himself. He knows. I think he really, really, really wants to get a win for the Gas team. I felt like it's just when he came back, especially after the second race, when in the main race when he came back after he had retired and rejoined, or sorry, he crashed, rejoined, then retired, came back in. There was all hugs and they were all kind of disappointed, but they were all trying to cheer him up. I think he felt not disappointed himself, but he just disappointed he couldn't get it done for the team, is the way I felt. But he just is not willing to accept that bike is not good enough. Which is that an excuse? I know I'm a massive fan of Pedro and I love him to bits and I think he's great for the sport, but is that a kind of good enough excuse to keep crashing in, week out, that the bike isn't good enough? Should he be taking these fifth positions that I'm saying that are so easy to come by? Or is he right to
last year, wasn't it, on the Honda? He just kept crashing, trying to get positions the bike couldn't get.
Exactly. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation. It was like, really, does he want to be finishing fifth every week, 7-8 seconds off, making sure the bike can make it in, or does he want to keep throwing out scenery in position? Like we've seen it happen in Catalonia. It's happened many races since where he's been in the front. Le Mans, he was in the top 4, top 5 when he crashed in Garage Vert. So it's been an unfortunate season that KTM has just made a step slightly. Well, obviously this bike is better than last year, but it's a step away from Ducati in terms of development from last year. I think probably if you put him on last year's bike versus the GP23 last year with the last year's tyre, I think he's won races by now. I think there's no question. I think if we saw how close Brad Binder was in many races last year, go back as far as maybe Thailand last year. I think Chang last year, I think Pedro probably could get that over the line and win that one. But yeah, it's just he's so fast, he's so on the edge, he's so over his limit, and he just wants to get that victory for that team. But it's great to see him up there. It's great to see other than just Ducatis, because there was about 3 laps to go in today's race, and they cut from what I would class as turn 2, that long shot from turn 2 down to 3, and it's just Ducati, and they're all kind of equally spread out a small bit in that shot. And I was just thinking, like, it's literally just Ducati, and it's in Japan at Honda's home track, and I was thinking Ducati just walked this. And in the end, I think they did lock out the top 5. I think there was 4 GP24s and Marquez in there. So yeah, it's just it's good to see him up there, but it's a shame that he can't get a good enough result. Obviously, great last time out, but that was a probably difficult track conditions, and used his similar to way Marquez can kind of when the track isn't perfect, the two of them kind of come forward, and maybe the leveler of the bike comes out of it, and they can kind of compete a bit more. But it was a bit sad really to see him crash out, because I felt he could have won the sprint, and I think he probably knows that himself. The main race, I think he doesn't have anything for them. I think his race is great and stuff, but I think that just a GP24 is just too good for that KTM, and as much as the riders on it too, like you're up against top class riders. So even though Acosta is doing absolutely amazing bits and pieces on that bike, it's just not enough at the moment, and it's sad, and he's not willing to accept it, which kind of have to give him credit for it. The fact he doesn't want to finish kind of not mid pack, like, but mid top 10 each week. I think I'm more impressed at the fact that he's passing Pecco, leading races and crashing, than him maybe being fourth every week or fifth every week or something like that. It's probably the right way to go about it for him, because he probably doesn't have it in him the way Marquez didn't seem to have it in until like halfway through last year to start finishing eighth. They're probably very like Marquez and Acosta. I really think they really seem to have a lot of similarities on track, and I think we look back at 2015 with Mark, he threw the bike at the scenery when the bike wouldn't fit, and I think that's what we're just seeing again this year, unfortunately, from Acosta. But I'm really hope next year KTM make a step. I'm hoping somehow the GP25 is a step backwards, and that we could see Brad and Acosta up there against Mark and Pecco. I think that would be a very, very juicy season for next year.
Yeah, I hope we can see the KTM up there a bit more, because it'd be great to see. I'm sure we'll see him and Marquez going for some race wins next year, which would be really, really good. I mean, like you're saying, obviously
factory rider versus factory rider.
Yeah, well. Exactly. And like you're saying, it's only really the GP24s that are, and Marquez on the GP23 that are actually beating him. If you look at the KTM versus the other GP23s, they're miles ahead of them. So, well, Acosta and Binder are. Miller's battling with the Yamahas, and Augusto Fernandez is battling with the Hondas. But, you know, it's like clearly the bike is better now than it was last year, but it's just unfortunate really that Ducati made this crazy step forward, and it does seem to be hampering Pedro, unfortunately. But imagine if like you said, the quality riders is against, if the other GP24 riders were like running at Morbidelli's pace every weekend, you know, Pedro definitely would have won a race so far. So it's not just the bike, of course, it is the riders, but yeah, I'm sure his time will come. But back to the front with those GP24s. Obviously, we had Jorge Martin, we mentioned already, crashed in qualifying, put himself right down. Was it 11th on the grid or 10th on the grid? I think it was. So not a great.
11th.
Yeah, so not a great starting position for him. Another damage limitation for him, and obviously he was able to just about make the most of it. Fourth place in the sprint, I think that was quite good from where he was. Second place in the main race, I think he'll probably take that at a track where I don't think he was beating Pecco anyway. And if he was going to beat Pecco, he had to start from the front row or pole position, because obviously he did the double here last year. Was a little bit strange last year in terms of the conditions. And I think even at the tracks where Pecco is better than him, I think in the sprint, if you get to the front, you can clock off the laps and keep the guy behind. Whereas in the main race, I think it was probably always going to be Pecco's to lose. So damage limitation, not too bad for him, but again, left himself with too much work to do, and I think very easily could have come away with 2 second places this weekend. So if not in the main race, definitely in the sprint, throw away some points with that qualifying crash.
I'm actually a little bit disappointed with Martin over the last 2 race weekends, because I think he should have stretched out a lot of points over Pecco in Mandalika. I think, again, I was pretty harsh to him last week that he crashed in the sprint. I think this weekend as well, he again, I don't want to say he crashed for no reason, because they're all on the limit. They're all giving it everything. He can't ride around to 80% to get on the front row. I know he's good, but he's not that good. I just feel he's been very good this year. He's made less mistakes than Pecco. He's taken second place, third place more often than crash. But I think at this point in the year now, he needs to win this title, to beat the factory team, to beat Pecco at this point of the year, he needs to be podium every single race and front row every single race. So he can't afford to be making these mistakes in either the sprint, the main race, or qualifying. And he made a mistake last week in the sprint. He made a mistake this week in qualifying. Is he going to make a mistake next month in the main race? Because his championship lead, that he had a massive lead. Yeah, exactly. He might go up the wets, he might go all out this weekend. But the championship lead is down to 10 points. And I feel like Jorge Martin's been the form rider. I feel like Pecco's been a limping kind of animal at the moment. He's just about getting the job done. He's had 2 sprint wins that I don't think he would have got if Jorge Martin, 1 didn't crash in Mandalika and 2 didn't crash in qualifying. I don't rate Pecco at all in the sprints. I think he makes more mistakes in the sprint. I think he's
got the right sprint race wins this year out of anyone.
and that's such an amazing stat because I still don't trust him. I didn't expect him to win the Mandalik in the sprint. I didn't expect him to. He shouldn't have won the sprints last two out. He should have lost to Pecco. Not Pecco. He should have lost to Pedro yesterday. And Martin should have beaten him comfortably in Mandalik. So he's been gifted two in my eyes there. And I think a lot of his sprints this year, crashed in Jerez, Le Mans, there was a mechanical.
Crashed in
Obviously, he does the
Catalonia,
double, Asa, Mugello, Catalonia, he crashes. So it's been very hit or miss. And yet still just shows how dominant two of them been. He's that he has the most wins in sprints and main race. It'd be a massive disappointment for Peck if he doesn't win this championship because how dominant he's been in terms of getting it across the line and getting wins. But for me, I feel the last few he's been kind of gifted, and Martin has been a big part of gifting them. I think Pecco's doing a good job at the moment, but I don't think he's untouchable at the moment. You look back at maybe Mugello, there was nobody beating him. You look at Assen, there was no one beating him. I feel like he was beatable. Maybe not this weekend. I think maybe in the main race, he probably has just about everyone covered comfortably. Maybe Pedro, if he can do something amazing, get a good start and kind of risk a bit more, and he could probably put Pecco on a bit of edge where he just said, I'd rather take second and go up against a rookie Acosta. But I just think Jorge Martin should be still beating him in the sprints, even in the weekends where he doesn't look stronger. I just think on Saturday, Pecco just doesn't look comfortable in them sprints still. I still think that he would 100% take FP4 if he was given it just to go round and round and to kind of compound his advantage into setup data that he could just kind of study over the Saturday evening and then just put into practice on morning warm-up and then go out and win the Sunday race. So as much as even though the stats make it look like he's had a really good Saturday for most of the year, I just feel like that Saturday is still a big weakness for Pecco, even though he's somehow managed to get in these wins. He's been gifted a few. Martin, for me, he's shedding points at the moment, and it's gonna, like, he could lose the championship lead in the next time out when we go to Phillip Island. It's getting tight at the top, and I think Martin is just starting to make more mistakes now than Pecco. I say that Pecco will probably crash next time out after saying that, but I just think throughout the weekends, I think Martin isn't having a smooth weekend, whereas Pecco mightn't be as quick outright most weekends, but he's seemingly just getting a whole weekend better. And I think that probably is just a sign that the factory can just squeeze an extra couple of percent out of a weekend than they can versus Pramac. I think that's just what we're seeing at the moment. And maybe Martin's just thinking, I was in this position last year, I made a few mistakes, and now he's starting to make a few mistakes again. Now he had a brilliant race again today, did brilliant in the sprint as well yesterday, so it's not a terrible weekend, but he went from high 20 points ahead to now only 10 points ahead, and you could easily see that they could be nearly level on points by the time we go to is it Thailand or Sepang after?
It's Thailand, I think, after.
So yeah, we could go to Thailand with them equal on points again for I think the third time this year they'd be equal on points if we get that.
That would be pretty remarkable, wouldn't it? But yeah, like you say, good weekend for Bagnaia, obviously this weekend, and Martin kind of limited the damage, but as much as he really could do. Bagnaia, pretty much since Misano, hasn't really made any mistakes. I suppose you make a good point in saying that, because of course last two weekends obviously he's taken points out of Martin, especially obviously at Mandalika, a track where he should have probably lost points to Martin. Really, he did a good job to actually gain the points, get those last two sprint race victories. So like I said, he has the most sprint race wins of the season. He has the most main race wins as well. Obviously the main Grand Prix, there's been 16 of them and he's won 8, so he's won half of them. And he's still trailing by 10 points. I think that speaks volumes about the amount of mistakes that have been made this season. So, like you say, obviously now it does seem like maybe Martin's making the mistakes more, but you can't trust either of them. It could just happen at any moment. I mean, a crash in qualifying, yeah, is bad. It's a mistake, but at least it's not a crash in the race. And they're both pretty liable to that as well. So, who knows what will happen. Obviously, this weekend was like a perfect weekend for Bagnaia. Obviously, you've got the two doubles. Like you say, perhaps to get gifted the sprint win by Pedro, but then at the same time, Pedro is pushing too hard to be ahead of him in the first place. So, you know, there is that element. You can't ride over the limit all the time and get away with it. So, if he was actually riding within his limit, he'd have been behind Bagnaia anyway. So, there is that argument to make. But, yeah, obviously, a really good weekend for him heading to Phillip Island. Obviously, a circuit where I think they've both gone pretty well at in the past. So, Martin would have won if there was one lap less last year. Bagnaia, it's a bit sweeping in the first few sectors. So, you got to think that it's got to play into his hands a little bit there. I think, did he have like his best race as a rookie in his rookie season there as well? So clearly,
Yeah,
a track
wasn't
he
he
clicks
fifth,
with.
fourth? Yeah,
Yeah,
he was right up there.
The only race that season where he really made an impression at all. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like you say, 10 points in it as well. It could be so close. At least the championship narrative is interesting because it's the race today really wasn't. It was pretty dull. Another dull race this season. I was actually thinking about it earlier. I could only really think of Jerez being a good race, really, Grand Prix wise. I mean, Aragon was interesting in a way, but I mean, it was pretty boring. I guess the only, like, watching Bagnaia come through was somewhat interesting, but obviously that ended in the crash with Alex Marquez. I guess Austin was quite good as well, but we do seem to be getting now a lot of these dull races. They spread out early on, and obviously, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be one of those people that says everything was better in the past. We had races like this in the past, even the greatest races of all time. Catalunya 09 is often said as the greatest race. You watch that race back, the middle of the race, not a lot's going on. They are just following each other. It's just how it is sometimes. But it seems like every weekend now we are just getting races that are not interesting. Mandalika wasn't interesting. Misano wasn't even interesting until the last lap, really. Nothing happened at that point. Even the sprint races themselves are not particularly interesting anymore. I suppose actually the first lap of this main race was very chaotic, but that kind of also proves the problem. It's so difficult to make passes in the race. Your first lap's your best chance when you're all bunched together, so you get people being really aggressive, and Air Bastianini pretty much threw his race away today by getting beaten up and making some tactical decisions that weren't great on the opening lap, so he lost too much time, and yeah, just overall not really another race that wasn't great, was it? Another one to add to the list of this season, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can't think of anything at all other than Jerez. I don't remember most of the weekends.
Yeah,
I'm kind of going through my European calendar in my head. I got as far as Sachsenring. I was like, I don't know who won there. I just remember Marcus crashing. Aston Pecco was head and shoulders.
Bagnaia. Martin crashed up the lead, didn't he, with a couple of laps to go?
But they were kind of like pretty close all race, but no overtakes all race is what I remember from that end. And the pressure got to him.
Similar to today, really.
It's been a rough season in terms of enjoyment. Again, it's quite fortunate that they've made so many mistakes that we're in this position now where it looks like Pecco has the run in form at the moment, whereas it looks like Jorge Martin, whether it's him or the team, is just starting to drop a few points where he shouldn't at this point in the season, and that's making this whole run-in interesting to see. Will the 10 points be overturned when we get to Phillip Island, or by the time we get to, we'll say, Sepang or Valencia? But it's not going to be who's going to be able to do it on the last lap into the last corner of Valencia, so it's going to be like,
just
going to sound terrible.
That's what'll happen now.
Yeah, literally. Was it 2014 Moto3 title that was done into last corner? Adrian Campos corner,
wasn't it? Like Rins died on the inside and lost the run. Vinales beat him.
So I'm going to make a bold prediction that by the time the main race starts in Valencia, out of the two of them, whoever's leading will probably be with the winner. I don't think there'll be.
You're not even going to say which one it's going to be. That's rubbish prediction.
Well, at the moment, it could be any of them really. They're kind of both hit and miss at times. So in this running, I think they're both going to make more mistakes. So it's going to be interesting because it's not going to be interesting on track. It'll just be interesting to see which of them makes the most mistakes and who can get it across the line. You would imagine the factory team with all of their wealth of knowledge and engineering power and just body, or the kind of just the power of that team. Exactly. And apparently the GP23s have had a weird downgrade, I read somewhere over the last few weeks.
Yeah, apparently so. They got a new flywheel mid-season, apparently, so to make them better, which kind of does make sense why they started performing potentially a bit better, because it helped them get out the corner better, but it made the rear wheel spin more, and apparently that's what made Marquez's engine blow up in Mandalika, because it over-revved, a bit like Rossi's did at Mugello that year. So
16, yeah.
So
very interesting.
Apparently that's what I think. It's the race that put that article out, I think. But
that was the one. I haven't read it, but I love reading headlines and not reading the rest of it because I can then go on and talk rubbish about it. But this weekend was dull. I'm quite glad that I slept through the real event and was able to watch it back in recording where I could fast forward. It's rare. It's very rare. I fast forward GP races, and I did it today in both the sprint yesterday, and the main race. Not many laps, but it was actually Josh. I think I only fast forward the last lap in GP because I knew it was kind of done and dusted.
What's the point? You must watch it up.
Because it's like I kind of already seen so many laps of it. The sprint, soon as Pecco got the lead, I knew it was done. So it was like I might as well skip the last lap, watch the last lap, and be done with it.
That was about the most interesting.
That's what I hate about having.
You saw Marquez got the inside of Bastianini. You have to rewind back.
Yeah, I managed to see that. I'm like, oh, let's watch this. That's the only issue that I hate about the flyaways is that's recorded, and I can't control myself when it comes to live sport. I have to keep skipping through it. I can't sit there and watch it. Whereas if it's Misano, I'll sit there and watch all 6 hours of racing that's on in a row without break, and I'll just carry on as normal, and I can do that. But then if I have the power to be able to fast forward and just kind of skim through it, I will, because it's just, I don't know, but live sport is where it's at, and then watching it and recording just for me just doesn't really give me the same enjoyment, because when you're watching it live, when you see Pecco crash, you're like, oh my god, I've just seen him actually do it again, whereas if I fast forward and I've missed him crash, I'm not as surprised in a way. But yeah, it's been a poor season overall, and I finished up on the point, and I think it's going to be a poor run-in, but I think it's going to be an interesting championship battle. Just on who makes the least mistakes will win it, and I think we've known that really all year.
Yeah, it seems to be what it is. It's the fact that they keep chucking it away, because, like I say, on paper, Bagnaia should be walking the championship. He's got 8 Grand Prix wins. He's got like 6 sprint wins, something like that. So that's most of the races, but he's not even leading, which is ridiculous. It's crazy when you think about it, that kind of win statistic. But because Martin's only won 3, it's not like he's won the other 8. It would be a bit different if, like, you know, they've both won like half each. Then yeah, of course one of them's going to be trailing, but yeah, it's pretty interesting. Now, one last time to put you on the spot, I'm going to say, who do you think's going to be...
Yeah, oh, sorry.
What? So I was like, who do you think's going to be leading the championship after Phillip Island?
Pecco. I think Phillip Island will be a leveler. They won't be able to use the ride-out devices. I think we'll see the Aprilias up there closer. I think we'll see Pedro and Brad up there. And I think we'll see Marquez up there. Mark, not Alex. Alex Marquez has kind of proved to me that he was at fault for the Aragon crash by doing the exact same thing this weekend to Mir.
He's ran him at the back, didn't he?
He ran into him and then ended up getting his bike wedged on his wing.
Yeah, poor old John. Yeah.
So yeah, I think, and because of that, I think there could be a bigger point swing in all races. I think you'll get riders in between them. I think so. I'm just gonna keep going the way it's going. I'm gonna go Pecco because he's after taking so many points out of him, and I think Martin might get pole or Bennett, and I think he could maybe crash in one of the races. I think we could see maybe one of them get taken out, because Miller Hairpin is just one of those ones where you come through stoners at such a speed and you just make a slight mistake and you're taking 3-4 riders out in front of you. So yeah, it could be one of those weekends where it could be a defining moment in the championship. I'll throw the question back to you. You can't say Rossi. That was my answer.
Damn it! I was gonna say Rossi, man. I thought he's gonna get on Bagnaia's bike and inherit his points.
Yeah. No. I'd probably trust him to make less mistakes than Bagnaia, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm actually gonna say Martin. I think he's gonna extend the lead. Not only gonna keep.
Oh, that's a bigger, bold decision.
Bold. Now,
any underlining performance issues you can say to back that up, other than just you feel it?
A similar kind of thing to you, really. The fact that there's going to be more people up there, and I just think Martin's pace there last year was so good that if he carries it through, I think like you are going to see. Like I think we could potentially, because it's a rider circuit and it takes away from the rider device and stuff, we could potentially see a Marc Marquez win or a Pedro Acosta win potentially, or those two take each other out. That's probably also very likely. We could see a Bastianini win. It is a tyre wear circuit as well. We usually get a bit of a group race as well, so could be anything. I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't even put it past like seeing John Zarco pop up, like randomly lead a lap or something, and then just get like pushed back. You know how like they did that time, like where they're all taking it easy at the start, and
it was a brilliant one too at one point. I'm fairly sure.
Yeah, that was the same race that Bagnaia got his good result, wasn't it? So all these things they tie together. That's the thing, but Genuinely though, like that's obviously a bit of a joke saying about Zarco, but I think the Honda will be more competitive because it sounds like their
100%,
biggest issue is the ride-out device, and that's not going to be a problem at
And in
Phillip
theory,
Island.
they have a bike that turns, so
We may
shocked
actually
that
see
even
their
did.
best result of the season. Remember Marquez a couple of years ago was nearly won when Renz won, and that bike was pretty bad too. So there you go then. But I think that's probably the end then of this episode of the MotoGP Extra podcast. If you are listening to the podcast on Spotify, please do rate it 5 stars. It helps us out and helps us out in all the algorithms and stuff, and helps other people find us so we can get more people involved. Also, if you're listening on the YouTube side, if you like the video and subscribe, it really does help us out as well. But we'll be back in 2 weeks' time to talk about the Australian Grand Prix at Phillip Island. Don't get up next week for it, guys, because it's not on. There is a week off. But yeah, we'll see you then to talk about the events of that weekend.